A foggy morning on Route 12. Ethan Cole pulled his truck to the shoulder where a silver Bentley had wrapped itself around an oak tree. Glass everywhere, blood on the steering wheel. A woman slumped against the airbag, barely breathing. He pulled her out, drove her to the county hospital, and left before anyone could ask his name. The only thing he left behind was an old wooden pencil that had fallen from his pocket onto the passenger seat. 2 years passed. He never expected her to find him. 2 years had passed since that foggy morning on Route 12, and Ethan Cole had not thought about the woman in the Bentley for a long time. His life in Millbrook moved in small, predictable circles. Wake up at 5:30. Make breakfast for Lucas. Drop him off at school. Open the garage by 7. Fix whatever rolled through the door. Pick up his son. Cook dinner. Help with homework. Sleep. Repeat. It was not exciting, but it was honest work. And honest work was all Ethan had ever known. The garage was a modest place on the edge of town. A concrete building with 3 bays and a hand-painted sign that read Cole's Auto Repair. Ethan had inherited it from his father, who had inherited it from his father before him. 3 generations of Cole men had spent their lives under the hoods of other people's cars. And Ethan saw no reason to break that tradition. The pay was enough to keep the lights on and food on the table. Beyond that, he did not ask for much. Lucas was 8 years old now, a quiet boy with his mother's dark eyes and his father's stubborn jaw. He did not talk much at school, and his teachers often sent notes home expressing concern about his social development. But Ethan knew his son better than any teacher could. Lucas was not withdrawn. He simply lived in a world of his own making, a world of colors and shapes and images that only he could see. The boy spent every spare moment drawing, filling notebook after notebook with sketches of birds and trees and faces he invented from nothing. Some days Lucas would stop drawing and rest his head on the table, complaining that he felt tired. Other times, Ethan noticed his son breathing a little harder than normal after climbing the stairs or walking back from school. He always told Lucas to drink more water and get more sleep. Boys his age were supposed to be energetic, but Lucas had always been the quiet type, preferring to sit and draw rather than run around with other kids. Ethan never thought much of it. He assumed it was just how his son was built. Sarah had been the one who first noticed their son's gift. She had been a painter herself, a talented one before the cancer took her 3 years ago. Ethan still remembered the way she would sit with Lucas at the kitchen table, guiding his small hand across the paper, teaching him to see the world the way artists do. When she died, Lucas stopped drawing for almost 6 months. Then one morning, without any explanation, he picked up a pencil and started again. He had not stopped since. The pencil Lucas used most often was an old wooden one, worn down to half its original length, with teeth marks near the eraser from years of nervous chewing. It had belonged to Sarah. Ethan had a dozen just like it in a coffee can on his workbench. But that particular pencil was the one Lucas carried everywhere. It was his connection to his mother, a small piece of her that he could hold in his hand. Ethan understood. He had his own relics. A wedding ring he still wore. A bottle of her perfume he never opened. Grief took different shapes for different people. Some evenings after dinner, Lucas would sit on the garage floor while Ethan worked on whatever car needed finishing. The boy would sketch in silence, occasionally looking up to study the way light fell across metal and chrome. Ethan would watch him from the corner of his eye, marveling at how much he looked like Sarah in those moments. The same concentration, the same slight frown when something was not quite right. Sometimes it hurt to look at him. Most times it was the only thing that kept Ethan going. Money was always tight. The garage brought in enough for necessities, but there was rarely anything left over for extras. Lucas never complained. He wore hand-me-down clothes and used the same backpack 3 years in a row and never once asked why other kids had things he did not. Ethan tried to make up for it in other ways. Weekend fishing trips to the lake, movie nights with microwave popcorn, long drives through the countryside with the windows down and the radio playing songs they both knew by heart. It was not much, but it was theirs. The people of Millbrook knew Ethan as a reliable man, the kind who showed up when he said he would, and never overcharged for his work. They did not know much about his past, and he preferred it that way. He had moved to town with Sarah 10 years ago, looking for a quiet place to raise a family. They found it here among the cornfields and church steeples and neighbors who waved from their porches but did not pry. After Sarah died, the town had wrapped around Ethan and Lucas like a protective blanket. Casseroles appeared on their doorstep. invitations to Sunday dinners, offers to watch Lucas when Ethan had to work late. He accepted the kindness, but kept everyone at arm's length. It was easier that way. Sometimes late at night, Ethan would sit on the porch and think about the woman he had pulled from that wrecked Bentley. He wondered if she had survived. He wondered if she ever thought about the stranger who had carried her to his truck and driven 20 miles to the nearest hospital. Probably not. People like her lived in a different world. A world of private jets and penthouse apartments and problems that money could solve. She had probably forgotten the whole thing by now. Ethan hoped she had. He did not save her expecting anything in return. He saved her because it was the right thing to do. That was enough. Victoria Ashford had not forgotten. She could not forget. No matter how hard she tried, the accident had left her with a shattered collarbone, for broken ribs, and a punctured lung. The doctors told her she was lucky to be alive. If not for the man who found her on Route 12, she would have bled out in that car before anyone else came along. But when Victoria asked who he was, no one had an answer. He had carried her into the emergency room, told the nurses she needed help immediately, and disappeared before anyone thought to get his name. For 6 months after her recovery, Victoria tried to push the mystery from her mind. She had a company to run, an empire built on art galleries and auction houses, and private collections worth more than most countries' GDP. There were board meetings to attend, acquisitions to approve, donors to charm. She did not have time to obsess over a stranger who wanted nothing from her. But the obsession grew anyway, like a vine wrapping around her thoughts until she could not shake it loose. The old wooden pencil was her only clue. When the stranger had lifted her from his truck and carried her into the emergency room, it must have slipped from his shirt pocket and fallen into the folds of her coat. One of the nurses found it there later and assumed it was hers. Victoria kept it on her desk in her Manhattan office, studying it during long conference calls, turning it over in her fingers like a rosary. The pencil was worn and old, the kind you could buy at any hardware store for 50 cents. There was nothing special about it. And yet, someone had carried it in his pocket like it mattered. Someone had saved her life and walked away without a word. Victoria had hired 3 different private investigators before one of them finally found a lead. Traffic cameras on Route 12 had captured a partial plate number from the truck that brought her to the hospital. From there, it was a matter of patience, cross-referencing vehicle registrations and interviewing gas station attendants, following a trail of breadcrumbs that led eventually to a small town called Millbrook and a mechanic named Ethan Cole. The investigator had compiled a file on him. 34 years old, widower, 1 son, owner of a struggling auto repair shop, no criminal record, no debt beyond a modest mortgage, no social media presence, no connections to anyone Victoria knew. He was, by all accounts, an ordinary man living an ordinary life. And yet he had done something extraordinary. He had saved a stranger and asked for nothing. In Victoria's world, people always asked for something. She flew to Millbrook on a Tuesday, renting a car at the regional airport and driving herself for the first time in years. The town was exactly what she expected. One main street, a diner, a hardware store, a church with a white steeple. Everything moved slowly here, as if time itself had decided to take a break. Victoria parked across the street from Cole's auto repair and watched from behind tinted windows as a man in a greased shirt worked on an old pickup truck. Ethan Cole, her savior. He looked tired, the kind of tired that went deeper than physical exhaustion. But there was something solid about him, something steady. He moved with the quiet confidence of a man who knew exactly who he was. A boy ran out from the back of the garage, clutching a piece of paper. Lucas. Victoria had read about him in the investigator's file. 8 years old, lost his mother to cancer, showed unusual artistic talent. The boy handed the paper to his father, and Ethan stopped what he was doing to look at it. His face changed, then, softening in a way Victoria had never seen in any of the powerful men she dealt with daily. He crouched down to be at eye level with his son, pointing at something on the page, nodding in approval. The boy beamed. Victoria sat in that rental car for 2 hours watching their simple interactions and felt something shift inside her chest. She had spent her entire adult life surrounded by people who wanted her money, her influence, her connections. Every relationship was transactional. Every kindness came with strings attached. But this man had carried a bleeding stranger to his truck, driven her to a hospital, and walked away. No reward, no recognition, not even a name. Why? What kind of person did that? She needed to understand. She could not approach him as Victoria Ashford. The moment he Googled her name, he would see the magazine covers, the Forbes profiles, the endless speculation about her net worth. He would treat her differently, the way everyone treated her once they knew. The sincerity would vanish, replaced by the careful calculation she had learned to recognize in people's eyes. If she wanted to understand Ethan Cole, she would have to meet him as an equal, someone ordinary, someone with no power over his life. The idea came to her that night, sitting in a motel room that cost less than her usual breakfast. She would create a character, a woman passing through town, car trouble, needs a mechanic. Simple, believable. It was deceptive. Yes, Victoria knew that. But she told herself the deception was temporary. She would get her answers, satisfy her curiosity, and leave. No harm done. She did not expect anything more than that. Kate Miller arrived at Cole's Auto Repair on a Thursday morning, driving a 10-year-old Honda with a deliberately loosened alternator belt. She wore jeans and a plain cotton blouse. No makeup, no jewelry except for a simple watch. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail. She looked like exactly what she was pretending to be, a woman on a tight budget, traveling alone, hoping the repair would not cost too much. Ethan walked out of the garage, wiping his hands on a rag. And for a moment, Victoria forgot how to breathe. She had watched him from a distance. But up close, he was different. His eyes were kind but guarded. The eyes of someone who had learned not to expect much from the world. A scar ran along his left forearm, old and faded. His hands were rough with calluses. He looked at her without recognition, without suspicion, and asked what seemed to be the problem with her car. Victoria heard herself explain the symptoms she had rehearsed. Strange noise under the hood, loss of power on hills. She had practiced the words so many times they sounded natural now. Ethan nodded and popped the hood, leaning in to examine the engine with the casual expertise of a man who had done this 10,000 times before. She watched his face as he worked, looking for some sign of the person who had saved her life. But he was just a mechanic now, focused on the task in front of him, treating her like any other customer. The diagnosis took less than 5 minutes. Alternator belt was loose. Easy fix. $20 for the part, $30 for labor. He could have it done by noon if she wanted to wait. Victoria said she would wait. She walked across the street to the diner, ordered coffee she did not drink, and sat by the window where she could see the garage. Her hands were trembling. She hid them under the table and tried to calm her racing thoughts. This was insane. She was one of the wealthiest women in America, sitting in a small-town diner, pretending to be someone named Kate Miller, who could not afford a new car. If anyone from her board of directors could see her now, they would think she had lost her mind. Maybe she had, but she could not turn back. The question that had haunted her for 2 years was finally within reach of an answer. Why had he saved her? Why had he walked away? She had to know. Lucas was the first to break through her disguise, though not in the way she expected. He wandered into the diner during his lunch break from school, ordered a grilled cheese sandwich, and sat at the counter with a sketchbook open in front of him. Victoria watched him draw, fascinated by the intensity of his concentration. The boy was talented, genuinely talented. His lines were confident, his proportions accurate. He was sketching the view through the window, capturing the main street with a maturity that seemed impossible for an 8-year-old. Without thinking, Victoria approached him. She introduced herself as Kate, mentioned that she was waiting for her car to be fixed, and asked if she could see what he was drawing. Lucas looked at her with cautious eyes, clearly unused to strangers taking an interest. But something in her expression must have reassured him because he turned the sketchbook toward her and waited for her reaction. Victoria told him the truth then, or at least a version of it. She said she worked in the art world, that she had seen a lot of drawings in her life, and that his was remarkable. The boy's face lit up with a shy pride he was clearly trying to suppress. He told her about his mother, how she had been a painter, how she had taught him everything before she got sick. He showed her the pencil he used, the worn wooden one that had been hers. Victoria recognized it instantly, the same type of pencil that sat on her desk in Manhattan, the one that had fallen from the stranger's pocket. This boy had another one just like it. When Ethan came to the diner to tell her the car was ready, he found Kate and Lucas deep in conversation about shading techniques. He stood in the doorway for a moment watching them, his expression unreadable. Then he cleared his throat and said the total came to $47. Victoria paid in cash, leaving a $10 tip that Ethan tried to refuse. She insisted. He accepted with visible discomfort. As she drove away from Millbrook that afternoon, Victoria knew she would be back. The conversation with Lucas had awakened something in her she thought she had buried long ago, back when she chose ambition over everything else. And Ethan, standing in that doorway, watching a stranger talk to his son about art, there had been something in his eyes. Not suspicion, not hostility, something softer, something curious. She had not found her answer yet, but she had found a reason to keep looking. She returned the following week, this time with a story about passing through again on her way to visit a friend. The week after that, she invented car trouble that brought her back to the garage. By the third visit, she did not need an excuse anymore. Ethan expected her. Lucas asked about her job in the art world, and Kate Miller, who did not exist, began to feel more real than Victoria Ashford ever had. Spring turned to summer, and Kate Miller became a regular presence in the lives of Ethan and Lucas Cole. She visited Millbrook every weekend, sometimes staying at the same cheap motel, sometimes driving back to the city late at night. She told Ethan she worked as a consultant for small galleries, helping them organize exhibitions and evaluate new artists. It was close enough to the truth that she could speak about it convincingly, and far enough from her real life that no one would think to verify it. The lie grew easier each time she told it. Lucas attached himself to her with a speed that surprised everyone, including Kate herself. He had been a cautious child since his mother's death, slow to trust, quick to retreat into his drawings when the world became too much. But something about Kate broke through his defenses. Maybe it was her genuine interest in his art, the way she studied each sketch as if it mattered. Maybe it was the way she talked to him like an equal, never condescending, never dismissing his ideas as childish. Or maybe he simply sensed that she understood loss in a way most adults did not. She began bringing him art supplies from the city. Professional-grade pencils, sketchbooks with thick textured paper, a set of watercolors in a wooden case that made his eyes go wide with wonder. Ethan protested at first, uncomfortable with the expense, but Kate insisted the gifts were nothing special. She said she got them at a discount through her work. Another lie added to the growing pile. The supplies actually cost more than Ethan earned in a week, but watching Lucas use them made every dollar feel worthwhile.